You've probably heard about being hooked on mobile phones, social media, or endless TikTok scrolling. But did you know there's also an addiction to taking photos? And no, I'm not talking about getting likes on Instagram. I mean the actual process of snapping pictures, something that affects both amateur and professional photographers alike. This and dopamine management is the topic of this video. We take photos for all sorts of reasons. Apart of making money, there's usually something about photography that keeps us coming back, even when some parts of the process feel boring or tedious. Depending on your photography style and personality, what drives you can vary a lot. Some people love taking pictures but dread sorting through them. Others thrive in the pre-production phase but would rather skip the actual shooting. We all need something we love about our work and hobbies. It's what gets us out of the bed in the morning and keeps us going. Yet sometimes we have no problem with having a drive to do something obviously unhealthy. Some of these behaviors are not healthy for us just because we get addicted to them. And I'm not just talking about obvious things like drug addiction. Especially when we are starting out in photography, we can get caught up in photo-related habits that actually holds us back from improving our skills. To understand addiction, we first need to talk about dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter that basically helps to increase or decrease the activity of various neurons in our brain and nervous system. You've probably seen it mentioned in articles about addiction and pleasure. Dopamine is all about drive and motivation. I am not a scientist in neurobiology, so I won't dive deeper in the topic of chemistry, but you can find interesting and well-popularized podcasts on dopamine from Andrew Huberman, link in the description. Dopamine affects many areas of our brain, including the prefrontal cortex, which is crucial for planning and staying aware of our actions. This part of the brain helps us hit the brakes when we need to stop something. It's both a planning tool and a control mechanism. At moderate levels, dopamine gives us energy and heightens our alertness and awareness, making us better at using our skills. It also helps us decide when to stop an action, which is another form of drive, essentially the drive to stop doing something. An important thing to remember is that dopamine doesn't care what we are chasing, it's just a chemical, and it doesn't distinguish between things that are good or bad for our well-being or life goals. When we talk about unhealthy drives, like addictions, there are mechanisms that make these addictive drives much stronger than any other motivations. This can cause us to stop finding value or pleasure in activities we used to enjoy. In a way, addiction can overshadow all the other fun things in life. This also applies to the intricate process of a photography session from start to finish. So here's the tricky part. We need to love certain aspects of photography to stay motivated and satisfied. But if one part of the process becomes too satisfying, it can take away the enjoyment from other essential elements that are crucial for our growth, whether we are professionals or amateurs. I've known many photographers who stayed at a very basic level for years because their sessions revolved around just one addictive element of the process that they loved. Usually it was one of two things. One is getting likes after posting their photos, and the other is the thrill of pressing the shutter button during a session. We won't dive into the first one now because it's a complicated issue, but the second one is easier to understand and manage. Beginners often see the process of taking photos as a bit of a lottery. The picture might turn out great or it might not. It feels like a gamble, and naturally, the more photos you take, the better your chances of getting a good one. Aside from certain types of photography where luck plays a role, like sports or street photography, most professionals envision the photo they want before they even press the shutter button. They plan their shots and minimize the gamble. But let's get back to addiction and dopamine. Here's the key thing. Dopamine is released in anticipation of a reward, not when you actually get the reward. This is super important to understand. Just thinking about something good happening to us makes our dopamine levels spike, pushing us to go after it. But what happens when we don't get what we hoped for? In gambling, for example, you can just play again right away if you lose. Similarly, you can take thousands of images, and each one of them can be this one perfect image that you truly desire. When it comes to addiction, Two factors are important. The first is the level of dopamine produced when achieving a goal. While I haven't found any research specifically about dopamine spikes in beginner photographers when they take a shot, there's plenty of research on gambling. Some studies on roulette players show that dopamine levels spike whether they win big or lose money. Dopamine doesn't signal pleasure, but rather how close you were to a reward, encouraging another attempt. Taking too many photos in a row is a similar situation. The second important factor is the time frame between the stimulus, the urge to take the photo, and actually taking it. In the case of snapping photos rapidly during a shoot, it's almost instant, with almost infinite potential for the next better shot. The effort to get the reward is practically zero. That's a thing about the photographers, that they like images, especially if these are their images, less so if these are images of others. Anyway, back to the main point. In gambling scenarios, dopamine naturally comes to us like vodka at a Polish wedding. The peak in dopamine doesn't trigger our actions directly, it's the drop right after the peak that does. A sudden spike creates a subsequent drop, making us seek out ways to raise our dopamine levels again. So we chase after whatever gave us that initial dopamine high. That's why we get up and look in the fridge when we are hungry. These cravings are everywhere in our daily lives and careers. Dopamine drives the action, not the outcome. People don't take photos just because they happen to click the shutter. They do it in anticipation of the outcome. An experienced photographer might aim for the best photo yet, or to satisfy clients' needs. Amateurs, on the other hand, often chase the thrill of taking photos for the gamble rush and the chemical roller coaster during a shoot. Similar action, different drives, different outcomes. But there's nothing wrong with that. I did it when I started out too. But this thrill while sniping images can overshadow the goals that truly drive our growth and development. So when I see a photographer during a fashion shoot running around the models snapping photos like a machine gun, I don't see a professional. I see someone acting like a junkie, not a true photographer. Most of us felt the rush of starting a session. The first few shots are enough to put some people in an almost intoxicated state where photos are all that matter. But in reality, it's the quality of the photos that matters, not the quantity. Controlling quality means planning, overseeing the process and understanding the context. These aren't as fun as the actual shooting, so in the thrill of hearing the shutter, we often ignore the crucial elements. A steady base of dopamine with a little excitement around the session is usually more than enough to keep you motivated. Additionally, having too high levels of excitement can cause deeper drops in dopamine levels afterward, going much below the base level. This is something you've probably felt after an especially thrilling shoot. If you train yourself to hold back just a bit, pausing before pressing the shutter to improve your framing, you will see significant improvements in your skill after just a few sessions. There are no shortcuts here. You need time to assess your image, framing and artistic value. Rushing through the process means you can't learn effectively. Repeating the same actions over and over again doesn't improve your skill. It just reinforces the mistakes you're making. By now you probably know if this video is about you. If you're a beginner photographer who takes thousands of images in one session and feels pleasure from spending hours culling them, you might be addicted. And that's okay. Photography is a fantastic hobby and you clearly have the drive for it. But like all addictions, after a while you will want more and you will find less and less pleasure in these processes. We are not talking about a small fraction of photographers. We've all been there. After that initial rush, many people burn out. You start to realize that every session feels the same and the quality of your images isn't improving. I want you to know that this is natural, and there are many other aspects of photography that can give you satisfaction if you slow down and look for joy in other parts of the process. In many ways, I think that's just the beginning of photography journey, when you feel that the shutter sound doesn't matter anymore, but the outcome does. And remember, when you are unsure about how to improve, consider attending workshops with an open mind, searching for new inspirations. I really hope you find it. But now, that's a wrap. See you in the next video.